Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Musoff. Today we are going to be solving radical equations. Now remember, a radical is something like this, or sometimes it has a number there. Alright, remember if there's no number, that means it's a 2. Okay, but that's what a radical is. So today we're going to talk about solving equations that involve these radicals. And the way to solve any equation is always to undo what the equation has. So like for example, we see addition, we undo it by subtracting. We see multiplication, we undo it by dividing. Well, the way that you undo a root is using a power or an exponent. So if I have a cube root, cube means 3. So I would take both sides to the third power. If I have a square root, that's 2, so I would take both sides to the second power. And to undo a fourth root, 4, I'm going to take both sides to the fourth power. So basically the way we're going to undo radicals or undo roots is to raise them to exponents. Okay, just 2 other side notes before we start solving. The very first step is always to get your root alone. So what that means is if you have an equation, look at just the side that has your root and make sure that there are no numbers not underneath the root. So for example, if you take a look at number 2, this plus 8, it's on the same side as the radical, but it's not under that bar. So that would be something we'd have to move to get our root alone first. Okay, and then the last thing here is you must check your answers. It is possible to have extraneous solutions in these problems, which are solutions where you didn't make a mistake, but your answer still doesn't work. So this is going to be our very last step in every problem, just to make sure that we don't have one of those. And that's going to be to check our answers. Alright, let's try a problem then. So in number 1, we have the cubed root of 5x plus 10 equals 5. So the first thing I would do, right here, is to get my root alone. And the easiest way to figure out, like, is your root alone, is it not? I like to highlight the root. And on that side of the equation, if the only thing there is what I've highlighted, then I know my root's alone. So here, like on the left side of the equal sign, that's the only thing I highlighted, so I know my root is alone. So I'm just going to write that real quick. Root is alone, check. Alright, once your root is alone, then what we're going to do is get rid of the root. And to undo a root, we take both sides to a power. So to undo a third root, I'm going to take both sides to the third power. So it's an exponent. Alright, and what that does is it cancels out the root. So now I'm only left with 5x plus 10 here. Now don't forget, this is 5 to the third, not 5 times 3. So just to show you in my calculator, I would do 5 caret 3 and press enter, and then it'll tell me what that's supposed to be. So 125. And usually those are the only 2 steps it takes, because then from there it should just be solving a linear equation, which is something we're used to doing. So I would, for example, subtract 10 here. Right, to undo addition, we subtract. And that'll give me 5x equals 115. And then to undo multiplication, we divide. So I would divide. And I would get x equals 23. But before I circle that, I'm going to check my answer. So off to the side here, I am going to check. The way you check your answers is you write down the original problem, so the problem that was already printed here for you. But instead of the x, you're going to replace it with what you think the answer is supposed to be, which is 23 here. So I'm going to write cubed root, but then instead of 5 times x, it'll be 5 times 23 plus 10. And what you're checking is, does that equal 5? So I'm going to put a question mark there. Does it equal 5? And we're going to do it on our calculator to see if it works. So I'm going to pull my calculator out again. Feel free to pause if you don't have your calculator. Right? Just pause the video, take it out so you're good to go. You can follow along with us. And I'm going to type in exactly what it says. So cubed root. Remember, cubed root, that's math, and it's the number 4 option here. Cubed root. And then I believe it's 5 parentheses 23, that's 5 times 23, and plus 10. Oops. There we go. And I'm going to press enter, so I'm just doing one side at a time. That says 5. So now I know that this whole thing equals 5, And now I'm asking myself, does that equal 5? Well, I do believe 5 equals 5. So that's how we check. Since we got the same number on both sides, it worked. So now I can box it. That's my answer. Okay, same kind of thing in number 2. I'm just going to separate these here. So again, our first step is to get our root alone. So I'm going to highlight the part that has my root. And because I have this other piece here on the same side of the equal sign, but not under the root, that's something that makes the root not alone. So I'm going to get rid of that first. And to get rid of addition, I subtract. And so 4 minus 8, that will be negative 4. And then I'll just bring this down. Square root 4x plus 8. So now my radical's alone, so I'm going to get rid of it. And again, remember, if there's no number here, that's really a 2. So to get rid of this, I'm going to raise both sides to the second power. Use those parentheses, because if you don't, then when you type it into your calculator, it might give you a different answer. Okay, so remember, the exponent and the root, they cancel out. So I'm just left with 4x plus 8. And over here, I'm going to type that in my calculator. So parentheses, let me clear this out. Parentheses, negative 4. So that's what I mean. You have to have those parentheses there. So positive 16. And then again, I'm left with just a linear equation, so we should be able to solve those. So I'm going to subtract 8. Subtract to get rid of addition. 4x equals 8. And then divide to get rid of multiplying. So I end up with x equals 2. But remember, before I circle that, I am going to check my answer. And to do that, I have to look back at that original one. So square root, that says 4x, so I'm going to do 4 times 2, because that's what I think x is, plus 8, and then another plus 8 outside. And I'm asking, does that equal 4? And once again, we're going to use our calculator. I'm going to type the left side into my calculator. So the square root, clear this out, the square root of 4 parentheses 2 plus 8. And remember, to move outside of the radical, you press the right arrow, or on some of our calculators, we just close the parenthesis. And then I'll do another plus 8. And I'll press enter. And that gives me 12. So now on the left side I have 12, and on the right side I have 4. Does 12 equal 4? No, it does not. So that's how I know that actually this answer I got is extraneous. So all I have to do is cross it out. It doesn't work. And since that was the only answer I got and it doesn't work, that means my answer is no solution. All right. So that's why checking is so important, because otherwise you're going to circle x equals 2 and move on when actually that's the wrong answer, so you lose points. All right, let's try one more together. Number 3, same kind of thing. All right, I'm going to look at my radical. I'm going to highlight it. And I'm going to say, all right, it's the only thing on that side, so it's alone. Check. So now I have to get rid of it. Remember, when there's no number, it's a 2. So I'm going to raise both sides to the second. Okay, the radical cancels out, so I'm just left with 9x. But on the left side, I got to be careful, because I have x plus 2. This whole thing is being squared. Well, remember what a square really means. It means multiply it by itself. So 2 times. Right? So x plus 2 squared is really x plus 2 times x plus 2. That means I have to FOIL this out. So let's go one step at a time. I have x squared plus 2x plus another 2x and plus 4. And if I combine like terms here, I got x squared plus 4x plus 4. So that's what ends up happening on the left side. So I'm going to rewrite that now. X squared plus 4x plus 4. On the left side, I still have 9x. Now, some of us, this might look familiar. This is a quadratic equation because it's got that square there. Remember, quadratic equations we solve a little differently. First of all, we have to get everything on the same side. And second of all, we have to factor in order to solve. So here, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to move this 9x over by subtracting it. And I'm going to give it to the one that's like terms with it. So that's minus 5x plus 4. And now if I want to solve this, I'm going to have to factor. Remember, factoring is when we do those double parentheses. It's x squared, so we put x and x here. And we need to find numbers that multiply to positive 4 and add to negative 5. So usually off to the side, I'll say, okay, 4, that's 1 and 4, 2 and 2. Well, 2 and 2 is definitely not going to work, so it's going to have to be 1 and 4. If I want it to be a negative 5, it has to be a negative 1 and a negative 4. And then to solve that, we just set each one equal to 0, and we solve. So I would get x equals positive 1 and x equals positive 4. Oops. But again, remember, before I circle these, I have to check them. So over here on the side, I'm going to check them. And I got to check both of them now since I have two answers. So we're going to check x equals 1 first. Plug it into the original. So I have 1 plus 2. Does it equal the square root of 9 times 1? Now these numbers are pretty small, so maybe you can do this one without the calculator. 1 plus 2, that's just 3. And square root of 9 times 1, that's the square root of 9. Well, does 3 equal the square root of 9? Yeah, the square root of 9 is 3. So that one works, so I'm going to circle it, or box it. And then I'll check my second answer, x equals 4. So 4 plus 2, does that equal the square root of 9 times 4? And again, maybe we can do this one by hand. 4 plus 2, that's just 6. Square root of 9 times 4, that's the square root of 36. Well, that is 6. So again, it checks out, so both of these are going to be my answers. Alright, and that's all there is to it. So take a look at these examples, see if they make sense. If you have any questions, make sure you ask your teacher in class. Otherwise, go at that homework and check your answers on Canvas or wherever your teacher posts them. Take care.